with the Big 12 championship game coming in just a few days. Happy to be joined by the voice of the Oklahoma State Cowboys, Dave Hunziker. Dave, how are things in Stillwater this week?
Well, it's been a pretty joyous place after the way Bedlam turned out, not only winning it, but the way that they won it, coming from behind late after a really rough third quarter and, beating your arch rival for the first time since 2014. It's been pretty ecstatic around here, but, I think players and coaches have quickly shifted to the attention to the matter that is at hand, and that's the championship game against Baylor. So while fans may still be rejoicing, I don't think that's the case here at the football operation.
Honestly, these are two teams that are still kind of relative newbies to a Big 12 championship game. So Oklahoma State's never played in it. Baylor's only played in it once before, and that was just 2 years ago. Is there a difference in the way that you have seen Gundy and the Cowboys handling this week as opposed to a regular game?
Not at all. In fact, everything that they've done has been basically like treating it like a road game, to a regular road game, even down to putting travel together, hotels together, all of that. While there are some nuances that come with playing in the Big 12 championship, for sure, some extra details that have to be taken care of. As far as the day-to-day operation, the planning, all that goes into it, they have said, this is a road game. That's what this is. Yeah, sure, it's a Big 12 championship game, but there haven't been any changes as to how they've done their work. It's just basically been put together like we're going on the road and playing a conference game.
These two teams played October 2nd, Baylor's first of two losses on the season. What is it from that game that you see the Cowboys looking to carry over here to AT&T Stadium on Saturday?
I think the biggest thing really was the ability for the most part to shut down the run. Baylor had the one long touchdown run on a 4th and 1 situation where they hit a long TD run, but outside of that, they weren't really able to run the ball much. And so I think that has to continue, as has been the case with many teams, there were some attempts to hit some deep shots early, and those were well defended and taken out of the equation. So I think that's the first thing. And I think sometimes, lost in Oklahoma State's win is that Baylor didn't have Terrell Bernard for that game. And he's a pretty important piece of the puzzle defensively for Baylor. So, both teams are in different situations from a health standpoint than they were in early October. That's always the case. No one's ever 100% this time of year, but, that's a piece to the puzzle that makes a difference that I think gets forgotten sometimes.
I'm glad you brought up Terrell Bernard. He was going to be one of my next questions. I mean, how big of an advantage is that for the Baylor defense to have him back against this offensive attack with guys like Jalen Warren and Spencer Sanders? And how big of a loss is it for the Baylor offense that Gary Bohannon is still questionable 3 days from kickoff?
Well, Bernard's another experienced guy. I think he's been second team All Big 12 twice, if I remember correctly, and just played a lot. And, you have Petrie, that's one of the better run defenders at his position in college football. He's been terrific. He's just another guy that's in the equation with a lot of experience. And that's true. There are several seniors starting on the Baylor defense, but he's a big part of who they are. And certainly with Bohannon, he got off to a great start and really was obviously, as you would expect, a huge part of what they were doing offensively, and had really grown, I thought, since what little we'd seen of him previously. So the thing about going into a big game, whether it's a conference championship game or just a big game at the end of the regular season, that experience at quarterback matters. I think it's significant in that sense. But you get into these conference championship games too, and it's a lot like the NCAA tournament. Weird things happen. I mean, heroes emerge out of dust, so and there's the opportunity for guys to do that in this game for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned the heroes. I mean, Bohannon was one of those when Charlie Brewer went down for the Bears 2 years ago in this exact game against Oklahoma. How are the Cowboys from the health perspective? How is the injury situation?
They're okay. I wouldn't say they're great. Danny Godleski, the center, didn't play last week against Oklahoma, and not really very certain about what he'll do. Logan Carter, Cowboy back, their most experienced tight end, if you will, did not play against Oklahoma. Don't know what his status will be. They're banged up in some other areas. They've had some guys miss some games as of late or be pretty limited. The injuries have been almost exclusively on the offensive side. The defensive side took some hits early from an injury standpoint, But since about the middle of September, that defense, for the most part, with just a couple of minor exceptions, has stayed injury-free. And I think part of that is they have so much depth on the defensive line, they're able to rotate guys in and out. I don't think there's a defensive lineman that averages more than 41 snaps a game, a luxury Oklahoma State's not really had before. So that's helped out with that. But, offensively, kind of banged up, honestly.
This is an OSU team that was kind of it instigated a lot of head tilting early on. You mentioned mid-September. 2 straight games, not a single point in the second half against Boise State and against Kansas State. I mean, what has changed for this OSU offense and gotten it to the point where it's at now, first Big 12 championship game chance for the first conference title in 10 years?
Well, again, injuries. I mean, the first 2 games when they really struggled against Missouri State and Tulsa, and I say struggled, I shouldn't say that when you win a game. That's kind of ridiculous. A lot of teams wish they could struggle and win. But, the offensive line, they were down Hunter Woodard, who's a really key part of their offense as far as the line's concerned at right guard. He missed the first 2 games. That was a big deal. When they went to Boise, they were basically starting freshman receivers. Tay Martin was injured. They had Brendan Presley, and that was it. Tay Martin was hurt. They were starting freshmen pretty much across the board everywhere else. L.D. Brown had been injured at tailback, allowing Jalen Warren to emerge. The emergence of Jalen Warren cannot be understated. That was a huge thing, and that breakout occurred in the Boise game. Spencer Sanders missed the opener against Missouri State because of COVID. So you just had lots of things they were dealing with on the offensive side. Logan Carter missed the first month and a half, 2 months of the season, starting Cowboy back. So there was just a long list of injuries that they dealt with on the offensive side. And as Spencer Sanders got comfortable, Jalen Warren gained, really just more and more momentum after that Boise game. And some of these young receivers grew up and others became healthy. Things really took off for them. And I think they have an understanding of who they are. They've become a little more explosive in the passing game in recent weeks, but, they will literally sit on a lead. I mean, if they get a lead like they did at West Virginia, they'll basically try to make a couple first downs and punt. They won't take any chances. That's the world they live in. It's changed a little bit in the last couple of weeks, but, they're so confident in their defense, they don't want to do anything to put their defense in harm's way. I mean, Kurtis, this offense has not had a single player start at the same position for all 12 games. Not a one. It's only the second time that's happened with Coach Gundy here. The other time was 2014, and they needed a Tyreek Hill miraculous punt return just to make a bowl game that year.
That's an incredible stat, and this is an 11-1 team, not a 7-6 team.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Juxtaposition is incredible. This is the only game this weekend that features multiple Broyles Award finalists. Jeff Grimes, the offensive coordinator there at Baylor, coming from BYU, his second straight year as a finalist, and then Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator at Oklahoma State. How much of a chess match is it with these two? Because I would argue to say that the offense is very clearly both teams' second unit, but I think the drop-off might be a little less severe with Baylor from defense to offense as it is at Oklahoma State, where you have these 2 Broyles Award finalists calling plays at the exact same time.
Well, we ran into the same thing last week, and with Lincoln Riley, who calls offense for Oklahoma, and he's well established as a guru, and so that was a big part of the chess match, was to see who would emerge in that. Lincoln Riley won the first half, and Jim Knowles won the second, and that's sort of how that went. Jim Knowles has made an impact on this program. Dana Holgerson made an impact on this program in 2010, just the one season he was here, with the retooling and reincarnation of Oklahoma State offensively. And Jim Knowles has done the same here defensively, but I think his impact has been even greater. You've got a really experienced defense. All those guys have played together for 3 years. They've grown up in the system. Last year it was pretty much all man. Now they mix in zone. They went rush 3, drop 8 most of the second half against Oklahoma. That's a total change, and they did it very effectively. So he's been incredibly impactful on this program, and those guys, they love playing for him.
This is a conference, Dave, that 4 months ago, everybody in the Big 12 kind of had the rug pulled out from underneath them with the news that Texas and Oklahoma would be leaving the conference for the SEC. Now, Texas and OU not playing for a Big 12 championship, and they've played in every Big 12 title game for as long as I can remember at this point. And obviously, we had that 6 or 7 year gap between conference title games. You look at the 4 teams that the Big 12 is bringing in, and you have 8-4 Central Florida, 11-1 Houston on an 11-game win streak, 12-0 Cincinnati. They'll face off in a conference championship game Saturday as well. And then you have 10-2 BYU. Where is the future of the Big 12 at this point?
Well, right now, I think it looks pretty darn good. I think that the only concern I really have moving forward is the television money. I think if everyone is able to stay somewhat where they are from a television revenue standpoint, I honestly think in an expanded playoff, which I think we're headed that direction, I think we're fine. I think we're just fine. What you concern yourself with is it's in the rough neighborhood of $40 million per school of television revenue right now. When we do a new contract with what would be the new membership, what will that number be? Will it be 40 million a school? Will it be 35? Will it be 27? Will it be 25? Will it be 30? We don't know. But the more success that you have with even the members that are joining the conference or coming in, like Cincinnati, you have to feel like that value will go up. So it's important, I think, what we're seeing with some of these other schools being successful as it pertains to the financial outlook of the conference. I firmly believe that if things are okay financially, then I think this league will be fine. What you can't have happen is, let's say that TV revenue drops to 25 or 26 million, and then everybody else is getting more money with their TV contracts. So they're going up in TV value 20%, 30%. You're going down 20 or 30%. Then the playing field becomes possibly financially almost too difficult to overcome. But again, you're talking about an expanded playoff. How much does that matter? You don't have, in a playoff, you don't have to beat them in a 3-game series or a 7-game series. You have to beat them once. That's it. That changes everything. That's why they fought it so long, I think, because the big boys, the blue bloods, we've had 16 out of 16 appearances in a playoff. The last 16 teams have all been blue bloods. 24 of 28 since the playoff started have been blue bloods. So they're not into a lot of change. They don't want to open this up. They don't want to let the riffraff in. That's what they would say. Keep the riffraff out of this thing. Well, that's not. I don't think that's going to continue. And a lot of that is television driven because of Fox and its relationship with the Big Ten and the Pac-12 and how that's sort of having an impact, I think, on playoff expansion and TV. So yeah, it's. I think the playoff will expand, and then I think there's a spot at the table, and I think you have a chance to be just fine.
What is, and I'll give mine here too, and I'll end on this. What is your biggest key for each team on Saturday? For me, for Baylor, I'm thinking the biggest key is you've got to win the battle up front. You have to make your strength on offense beat Oklahoma's strength. Like you said, they're able to rotate guys in on the defensive line, and you've got to wear down the defensive line. For Oklahoma State, to me, the Cowboys just need to keep this business as usual.
Yeah.
You have to win it the same way that you won the Boise State and Kansas State games, then so be it, because you're still a conference champ, you're still 12-1, you still have a shot at the college football playoff at that point.
Yeah, the tricky thing for Baylor to me, and this is very simplistic and it goes far deeper than this, but one thing that's jumped out to me, see if I remember my numbers, I hope I have them right, something like only 6 opponent possessions have started in Baylor territory all year, and it's something like 8 that have started outside the opponent's 36-yard line all year. That is crazy field position. Crazy field position. It's driven by special teams that are really, really good. Oklahoma State has the highest rated special teams unit in the Big 12. And depending on who you would listen to, Pro Football Focus, I think now has the Cowboys 3rd. Some of that advantage that Baylor normally enjoys goes away when you play Oklahoma State, because Oklahoma State's good at covering punts. They're great at covering kicks. They've returned 2 kickoffs for touchdowns, including one by Brennan Presley last week against Oklahoma. That's the interesting thing. I think these two teams in many ways are a lot alike. And I think that the tricky part for Baylor in that scenario is they run into a team that might actually be better at doing that than they are. So that's a big part of it. I think the kicking game is huge because, if either team blinks in special teams, then they've got a problem. And it was Oklahoma last week in the big game against Oklahoma State that while the Cowboys fumbled a punt, so did Oklahoma. And then the difference in the game, turns out to be the kickoff return for touchdowns, because you look at the return yards, Kurtis, there was almost, I think, about 90 yards difference in return yards between the two teams. And next thing you know, it's a 4-point game and it's the difference. So I think the kicking game is really important. And then, which team can rush the football? That's what it all comes down to is, which team, just as you said, the battle up front, who can rush the football, that'll dictate it. Because both teams, when push comes to shove, both these teams want to run the ball.
That they do, and that's something that 5 years ago we wouldn't have said about either or.
No, not at all.
There he is, the voice of the Cowboys with the keys to this week's Big 12 championship game. Dave, really appreciate your time. Look forward to seeing you in Arlington on Saturday.
Oh, happy to do it. This will be fun.